Well, hello. Thank you for joining today's talk. I'm Derek Top with Opus Research, and we're here to learn about GPT 4.1. There was some big news with OpenAI earlier this week about release of the new model, and there's been some implications for the customer service contact center industry and kind of how this may move the ball forward when it comes to prompt-based flows and what's next for conversational AI. So to tell us a little more about the news, I'm going to have Amy Stapleton tell us about it and kind of what it means for us to be thinking about this. Amy?
Well, yeah, I mean, the news came out, I guess, 3 days ago or something that OpenAI released 4.1. The names are so confusing. And I was
Yeah.
just starting to get my head wrapped around that because it is not one of these thinking models. It's more of a traditional model, but they had fine-tuned it. I'm not sure if fine-tune is the right term. Anyway, they had reinforcement learning it so that it's very good at instruction following, which to me could potentially have implications for contact center use cases because as we're talking to builders, solution providers that are creating these tools, they sometimes tell us that they steer away from moving in the direction of generative AI because these models are not good at following instructions, or they come up with flows or mechanisms whereby people can break down workflows into discrete kind of granular tasks so that you can explain these tasks in steps. Because again, if you were to just give the model a bunch of instructions within a prompt, it would sometimes not follow the instructions.
Right.
But then
So,
I found out that yesterday OpenAI released two new models, which are
let's,
supposedly even more, I guess, getting more interest, let's say, than the 4.1. The 4.1 is a API only model,
right.
whereas these new models, see if I have that right, O3 and O4 mini are their latest and greatest thinking models that are available for you to utilize through the ChatGPT interface. So when I found out that, I was like, that's kind of weird. They just released the 4.1, which supposedly is going to replace 4.5 in the API. And now 2 days later, they come out with the new thinking model. So it's interesting
It's
to
called
try to figure
flooding
out
the
like which one
zone,
should I
I
care about?
suppose,
Yeah,
right?
yeah.
Huh?
It's
Called
fun.
Well,
flooding the zone.
well, think about it from a commercial standpoint, right? They're under a lot of pressure to actually, start making money. And so coming out with the lower cost model, which is 4.1 and 4.1 nano and 4 dot, there's like some sub variants that are even more stripped down and even lower cost is maybe a good way to do that. Whereas the models All right, first of all, I'm going to take a step back and totally agree with Amy here. Their naming, their nomenclature is insane. Like whoever is in charge of that is a Looney Tune. 4.1 coming after 4.5 is
Has,
awfully
has
reminiscent of,
Ian's image sort of become
yes,
negative man here?
I
Yeah,
don't know what happened there. I have no
Okay.
idea what
that's
Well,
funny.
carry on, Invisible
I
Man.
know.
happened.
He doesn't want to own up to whatever he's going to say here.
Well,
So
no, but think about the,
Well,
the numbering system. It's just a little too reminiscent of like the hallucinations that these models sometimes
Right.
have.
It's like a
That tell
random
you
number
that
generator.
that like,
But
number 23 is actually larger than 47. Like,
correct.
sure, 4.1 comes after. And 4.0 isn't actually a real model. It's like the whatever features they decide to put in. So it's a family model. Like, oh, right, the nomenclature is crazy, but I do think that flooding the zone isn't exactly the way to think about it. I think of it as they've got to move the ball ahead in keeping consumer excitement about the technology, but they need to make money. And Chat GPT isn't the thing that's going to make them a lot of money going forward. It's this API based
I
approach,
don't know. They're selling
probably.
a lot of these pro licenses that are
Yeah, that
the $200 a
when we're
month. I don't,
talking about scaling up to what their valuation is, it's going to
okay.
have to come from enterprise, and the API is the approach for enterprise.
But
That's
even if
separate
it
and
is,
apart from all of the benefits that you were talking about.
yeah. But even if it is API based, the screen people interact with, I keep thinking like when ChatGPT debuted, and what was that, 2.5 years ago or whatever, um, there was this talk that, oh, you're gonna all have to reskill and you have to become prompt engineers. And I think having either an API based or a ChatGPT front end on it is it you're not engineering prompts. You're describing what you want, and then you're getting some confidence, whether, there's uh, model context protocol. And, you can come up with all kinds of names for what's going on, but it's getting better at carrying out plain English commands as opposed to prompts. And then sort of, magic is happening. It's determining, what it invokes and how it parses it up and carries it out. Um, and then I think to both your point, it can go sideways, and may fail. That's just that's a quality of LLM Gen AI stuff, but it's doing a better job of just supporting actions that people want to take. And kind of the more they understand what they're looking for, and the more experience they gain just sort of conversing with these things, the better results they get. And we've kicked that off.
Well,
It's
and I think that's the big question is this going to move things forward? I mean, like we talk to a lot of vendors these days. We like to talk to a lot of customers in terms of how they're approaching the Gen AI world. It's still very much rules based. There's still some reticence about putting these resources in front of customers. Some people lead with safety is the reason, like, okay, this is why our product's better than the others is because safety is, we're worried about input and output type of either prompt, attacks or hallucinations. And so I guess the question is are those fears being addressed, and are we still in the same kind of, we're iterating on the better engine, the better reasoning, but we're actually not necessarily doing anything when it comes to actually large scale customer facing deployments when it comes to Gen AI.
Well, let's also remember, if you didn't read the news, that unlike all of the previous models, this one came without the usual safety report. So there's that. But like, okay, but that's sort of a near-term problem. I think longer term, we're seeing brands, we're seeing the technology arms manufacturers, whether they're the model folks, whether they're all the applications that are built atop these foundational models, assuming that that comfort level will grow such that a tool like this, in the way that Amy described it, I think is really good. We're not talking about just using the tools. It's like Dan said, deciding which tools to actually use, right? It's not you have you go and you invoke this thing. It is, what thing do you need to invoke to actually get to the outcome that you're looking for, right? It's going to take a while to build up that confidence. And I'm not sure that not releasing a safety report is the way to do that exactly. But, directionally, I do think that that comfort level is starting to grow, both on the consumer side with things like GPT, as Dan was saying, just like everybody getting used to using these things and actually getting good results from them, but also enterprises. And I think interestingly enough, given that we're talking about contact center, a lot of that comfort comes from sort of the non-directly conversational uses in the operational side of a contact center, right? If it really can understand the conversation that an agent, a human agent, is having with another human customer, um, such that it can do scoring and quality stuff, you start to really build up the confidence that no, this thing really understands what's being said. And then we can start to build out, okay, now we're ready to have it actually take action, not just converse, but take action, which I mean that's the how of how this becomes magical, right?
and,
Nobody wants a conversation.
well,
Oops.
Oh,
There he's
We
gone.
love
See, I was just
yeah.
going to argue with this point. That's just like him to leave ahead of time.
keep going. Yeah, in
But
his
but
absence.
just to finish it off, because we're probably talked long enough.
Yeah.
Also, don't forget that the costs are coming down. They continue to
Right.
come down. That's a big deal. I was just talking to a solution provider recently who was saying that these deterministic flows right now cost like 3 or 6 times, 3 to 6 times less than a generative AI flow. But as the cost of those probabilistic generative tools goes down, then that's going to mean that there could be companies that are willing to switch these more deterministic type use cases to something that's generative.
Right.
So anyway, I think that there's a convergence between the models getting better and the costs coming down. That's shows
Right.
you where things are headed.
Which also means this isn't about GPT, whatever, 3, 4, 5 nano mini. You'll see Claude, you'll see Perplexity, and you'll see Google's stuff, all sort of following the cost curve down, adding these capabilities, doing that sort of support, supporting success using these. I'll still call them conversational front ends. You sort of use plain English to describe what you want, and also we brought it up here that their results, they're outcome based. So you say what you want the outcome to be, and that magic happens, and it figures it out, and it ain't just OpenAI. Every single entrant is doing this.
Right. Well, Ian, you're back for the final word here. So
Yeah,
we may
boy,
have
did we talk
we might you were kind of
in your absence.
a shadow there for a while, but let's go ahead.
I like being, all about the negative space. That's
Yeah.
Negative man.
No, I'm not being negative. I'm being
No, you're
positive.
not.
I'm,
Yeah, yeah,
I'm
you're
being
right.
very positive about the future of this, except for not releasing a security report. I don't love that.
Yeah.
Um, my last word here is that one, well, there's two last words. One, if you haven't read Amy's blog describing some of the potential implications for the sort of action taking, the tool selection, and so on that's inherent in 4.1, you should go to opusresearch.net and check it out. That would be thought number one. And thought number two is going back to our joking about flood the zone. There's supposed to be a whole bunch more coming from OpenAI this summer.
Mhm.
So I have a feeling that whatever we're seeing, the conversation will be supplanted in just a couple months by something else and something else and something else. And as Dan was saying, it's not just OpenAI. We're going to see this from this flood of new models coming all of 2025.
Well, someone
Cool.
else for us to talk to as it comes around, huh?
Yeah,
Never a dull moment around here. So, all right. Thanks, everyone.
thanks.
Thanks.